and pulled up a half a dozen different dictionaries, all of which gave the exact same one and only definition that I use. A feminist is one who advocates equal rights and treatment for women. That's it. That's the only definition there is or ever was. Although there is a colloquialism that feminism is the radical idea that women are people too. Now, if you look at the actual definition in the negative, you'll see that a non-feminist is someone who does not advocate gender equality, meaning that they will accept gender inequality, which is exactly what sexism is, and I'm right again. If you are not a feminist, you are a sexist by definition.
Also by the people, it's also in practice, not just the dictionary definition, but the way that the feminists identify themselves.
What's the definition? I don't think it really needs to have a rigorous definition. I've never been one who's a fan of labels.
And they all still, in practice, still agree with the dictionary definition, so that the dictionary definition is verifiably correct according to the feminist movement itself.
I have never been an equality feminist. Never, ever. Not just because I don't think the present condition of men is anything I need to aspire to.
Yeah, I'm sorry. There's just somebody that's prattling on, obviously has no idea what they're talking about, but just wants to be part of the hate group. Oh. Clearly, I am not part of a hate group, but they want to associate me with one, even though they've had many different times where I've explained exactly what I mean, and clearly I am not in the confines of the ridiculous little box that they've made up for me. Do you agree that that is the only definition of feminism?
Well, generally...
Can you show me a different one?
Women's studies is generally associated with feminism as a paradigm for understanding self and society. Although there are many definitions of feminism and some disagreements concerning a specific definition.
Can you show me one that any feminist organization actually endorses?
Is that if feminism is all things to all people, then what is it? I mean, how do we locate it?
That's it. That's the only definition there is or ever was.
As a radical political movement in our lives, if everybody just makes of it, which doesn't mean that we should demonize, but we do have to be clear about what are the boundaries.
I've become increasingly worried about the direction mainstream internet feminism appears to be headed, at least in the West. Unfortunately, many contemporary discourses in and around feminism tend to emphasize a form of hyper-individualism, which is informed by that neoliberal worldview.
If you can show me a second definition, then I will have to concede that there is another definition. Otherwise, that remains the only definition there is.
More and more, I hear variations on this idea that anything that any woman personally chooses to do is a feminist act. This attitude is often referred to as choice feminism.
That is representative of the movement. If they're using a different definition, then show me what that definition is.
The Update is honored to be speaking to the acclaimed feminist and luminary of social activism, Germaine Greer. How do you define feminism, and do you believe the name of this movement matters, and if so, why?
I choose not to define feminism.
And all of your criticisms against me for using that definition correctly and properly?
I choose not to define feminism. Because to define something is to limit it. And you define in terms of the present, where we are now. So you can't very easily see how the definition will change as time changes and priorities change.
Yes, you haven't met what seems to be quite a large presence.
I haven't met the weird outliers that people keep alluding to.
So if you believe any of the following, seeing diverse bodies, ethnicities, and gender expressions on screen and in magazines, surprise, you're probably a feminist.
I haven't met the weird outliers that people keep alluding to.
I think it's important to recognize that harassment is, as someone had mentioned, it's not just what is legal and illegal, right? Harassment is threats of violence, but it's also the day-to-day grind of you're a liar, you suck, you know, making all of these hate videos to attack us on a regular basis.
Liars that people keep alluding to, but I've met the bulk. I've met the mainstream, certainly.
Muslim feminists are very creatively working with Sharia commentary, working with the Quran to say, look, feminism is here in our own tradition. They're blending a history of Islam with the ideas of the Enlightenment very effectively to make a case for raising women's status and for women's autonomy and dignity.
Too, but I've met the bulk. I've met the mainstream, certainly.
Before I say anything else, I have to thank you, Sabrina, for writing this. I think you've done a tremendous act of public service, and I'm genuinely very, very grateful.
A 5-month police investigation led to this conclusion.
There is no substantive basis to conclude what is described in that article happened then.
Thank you. It is hard to read an article like this and avoid the conclusion that we live in a culture that hates women, just hates us.
I mean, part of the reason why I chose University of Virginia is because I felt that it was really representative of what was going on at campuses across the country. When I spoke to experts,
the rape activists on campus believed it. She spoke at the rape activist, seminars.
They told me that the scary truth is that if you dig deep enough, really in any campus, this is probably what you will find. That what happens at University of Virginia is probably not the exception. It's probably, this is the norm.
Men are not systematically oppressed based on their gender, and that's a fact. But women are, and that's a fact too.
We could maybe talk more about these, but here are some solutions, or possible solutions. On media, on media, television interviews, on platforms and political meetings, at any presentations, if there's no woman speaker, then the event does not take place. The interview is foregone, the political meeting is cancelled. One cannot get around the rule by using a woman as an MC. That's merely window dressing. Also, women get to speak first. In classroom discussions, in question periods, and at public events. Men should not be allowed to monopolize these forums.
What are there's so many things, right? We could brainstorm a million ways that we could create these structural changes. And creating structural change means people have to follow those structures.
I think that I'm doing this right now in my classrooms, in the management department. Women get to speak first. I think that is a primary issue that we actually have to look at, how we do question and answers, and we can start today. Thank you.
Actually, if they weren't, if the definition of the men's rights activist wasn't that they were a hate group.
This is what men's rights look like! This is what men's rights look like! This is what men's rights look like! This is what men's rights look like!
You should be fucking ashamed of yourself. You're fucking scum. You are fucking scum. Fucking rape apologist, incest supporting, woman hating, fucking scum.
Is there someone else that can wait? Does she want to follow me?
Fucking scum.
That specifically existed only to counteract feminism?
We're not super interested in talking to you, first of all, but basically we're here to shut down an event that is promoting the patriarchy.
But what part of the men's rights movement are not exclusively extremists? Can you show me anybody that is representative of feminism as a movement that objects to advocating men's rights as well?
Oh, because apparently men have been oppressed for being men. Oh! We make up 80% That's mental health issue. That's a fucking mental health issue. That's not a men's rights issue.
Have you checked grams for women and maybe one for men? So go down to the gravesite.
That within the feminism movement, that any extremist that holds deviant views that actually go against the definition should and really could only be adequately corrected by within the feminism movement and not outside of it?
Opinion, what's the cure to our westernized kind of idea that it's okay to catcall at women and that sort of thing? What is the solution in your opinion?
What is the solution to catcalling? Certainly not walking around in my underwear.
That holds deviant views that actually go against the definition should and really could only be adequately corrected by within the feminism movement and not outside of it.
This video game character is dressed too sexily. I don't like it. Change it. I'm dressed too sexily and you don't like it? Stop oppressing me!
If you are not a feminist, you are a sexist by definition.
Rape is bad, and if you're not a feminist, you're pro-rape.
don't realize that if you look up under the Southern Poverty Law Center, you will actually see the men's rights activists and a number of other anti-feminist organizations officially listed as hate groups. So it's not just me saying that. It's his ignorant ass not knowing that.
Well, nobody has to save you because you're a fucking white man who gets to do whatever he wants to in this space, right? Okay. So I'm saying, no, you do not have permission to walk around videotaping women of color and acting like you can do that.
I've heard rumors of, I've never encountered anybody like this, because if I ever did encounter them, I would certainly shut them down and correct them. But I've heard rumors of unnamed individuals who believe that feminists have to also be communists.
By focusing on individual women with a very narrow individual notion of empowerment, it erases the reality that some choices that women make have an enormous negative impact on other women's lives.
Let's assume those people exist. Do you consider those people feminist or not?
I couldn't, because how could a feminist be promoting communism as that doesn't fit the definition at all?
Okay. Now, here's my
if you talk about all of the mainstream of the movement, how would communism ever become part of the conversation?
So, when we talk about how to be a feminist, for me, that means being committed to something much larger than ourselves. It's understanding what role you play in our collective movements for liberation. It's re-examining our desires and interests and understanding how those are often shared by how they're often shaped, maybe shared, who knows, by capitalism, patriarchy, and white supremacy.
Well, obviously, if you've defined it to be that, then that's what you say.
It's not me to define it. It's the only definition there is.